Hey everyone, it's Chris for Fantasy Football X. Today we're going to be looking at a 10-team mock draft with half PPR rules from the number one position. So if you've drawn number one for your office pool or for your fantasy league of any kind, this is what we're going to be looking at today. So I'm on FantasyPros.com, my favorite site to do the draft wizard, which is just a really good way to simulate a mock draft without having to wait for a lobby to fill up or for a lot of human players, half of whom go on auto right away anyway, or just don't show up at all. So we're going to be looking at the number one position, half PPR, which is what I'd recommend anyone's league be these days. So we'll just go to start your draft here. And of course from the number one spot, pretty easy this year. The no-brainer is Christian McCaffrey. I've seen a couple people say they want Saquon Barkley. I would go McCaffrey all the way. He's proven it more than Saquon has. And there's a lot more weapons, I think, in the Giants offense, especially this year. So McCaffrey's a pretty easy pick. You don't spend a lot of time thinking about this here. Load up the draft board view, which I like, and go to running backs, and then boom on Christian McCaffrey, my favorite player, despite the fact that I'm wearing a Chad Johnson jersey for some reason. Okay, what I will always say every single year, especially in, I want to say standard league, but ESPN now calls standard PPR or PPR standard. In a non-PPR or a half PPR league, I always recommend you prioritize running backs to a pretty extreme degree because they're so hard to get later. This year might be the craziest year I've ever seen for just a complete lack of running back depth. It's really, really brutal after the first couple of rounds. If you're not getting out of the first three rounds this year with at least two running backs, I think you're going to be in trouble. And you'll see why here. So we got McCaffrey at the beginning here. And this is a pretty favorable draft for us because we now can actually get two more stud running backs. We can actually get Kenyon Drake and Miles Sanders, both of whom I like. You could also consider Clyde Edwards-Helaire here, but he's a bit risky since Damian Williams is still the starter, and we're not really sure if Edwards-Helaire is going to be the next Christian McCaffrey or the next Darren Sproles. So, and then if you look past this here, look at this just barren wasteland here. Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, Carson, Gordon, Connor, Bell, Johnson, Jonathan Taylor. All of these guys have severe issues in redraft leagues, which is where you're only playing for 1 year, which is what this draft is all about. We'll look at dynasty and keepers and other videos, but for now, we're looking at just single year leagues, like office pool leagues and that type of a thing here. So I'm definitely going to go ahead with Kenyon Drake and Miles Sanders. The only two other guys you could really consider, or the only four guys you could really consider in the second round, would be the top two tight ends and the top two quarterbacks. That's, of course, Travis Kelce and George Kittle for the tight ends, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson for the quarterbacks. Anyone else I'm not even glancing at unless they're a running back in the second round there. So for me, if I can get three studs that I like from the running back side, I'm doing it. And it's very, very tempting to take Lamar Jackson here. Very, very tempting because he was averaging about 8 points more per game than any other quarterback. So he is, assuming he keeps that up, of course, he is a real edge there. So very, very tempting. If one of Drake and Sanders were off the board, I would probably take Lamar Jackson. But it would really come down to Edwards-Helaire versus Lamar Jackson there, and it's a tough one. But the thing is, you can get a decent quarterback at the very, very end of the draft. I mean, if I don't get Mahomes or Jackson, which I rarely am this year, I'm just waiting right till the very end, and I'm taking someone like a Tannehill or even a Gardner Minshew at the very, very end of the draft, and those guys are going to be just fine for you if they stay healthy. So let's go ahead and take Kenyon Drake and Miles Sanders here. I also think in most drafts that you do, especially live draft, if you're with your office and some of the guys aren't super big into fantasy football, and maybe you're not either, whoever's watching this video, I think you're going to see those guys get severely overdrafted. I think by the time it got back to us at the first spot, so the end of the second round, beginning of the third, I think you would see that in most drafts, Lamar Jackson at least will have been taken off the board, I would guess, and one or both of the tight ends, I think, as well. People like to really overdraft those positions for sure when there's a couple studs on top. Okay, so it's come back to us here. So what I've been looking at this year is after we get 2 or 3 stud running backs, we can then really load up on running back depth later on in the draft, kind of around here. I'm usually using these picks here, kind of 9 or 10 through 13 or 14, and almost exclusively on running backs, and you'll see why here. So, and this is why right here you really want to make sure you've actually gotten your studs out of the way, because I mean this whole tier 4, as Fantasy Pros calls it here, is just not good. I like Devin Singletary. I'm a little bit concerned about all the competition he has. They brought in Zach Moss via the draft for goal line carries probably. And it's just, it's a little bit concerning there. But I do like Devin Singletary. Other than that, boy, Raheem Mostert had his moments. But with San Francisco's backfield, you're going to see where just, Jeff Wilson Jr. gets a couple of red zone looks, and 1 week Tevin Coleman will just get more carries than Raheem Mostert. So I think this is a real overdraft for Mostert. So because the top 2 tight ends and the top 2 quarterbacks are off the board, I'm going to be looking at running backs. I'm going to be looking at wide receivers here. You could consider tight end Mark Andrews, who is Lamar Jackson's favorite target in Baltimore. You could also consider Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, a more premium quarterback. But in single quarterback leagues like we're doing here, it's not that much of a priority. Again, you can get amazing quarterbacks way, way later. You don't need to use this kind of draft capital. So I'm going to take a couple of good wide receivers here. I really like A.J. Brown a lot this year in Tennessee. Ridley and Woods I like. I'm going to go with Woods on this one. A lot of people are going to be drafting Cooper Kupp before Robert Woods, and that's a mistake this year because Robert Woods did become the #1 receiver in Los Angeles, I guess now, the Rams, last year, along with Higbee. And Cooper Kupp really was not good to end the year and wasn't even on the field nearly as much as Robert Woods. So if you're having to decide between Woods and Kupp this year, you're going to want to take Robert Woods. And I know that seems funny. He only had 2 touchdowns last year. He started the year clearly behind Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp did finish as a top 5 wide receiver in the league last year. But when they changed with a few weeks left to 2 tight end sets, Robert Woods got a lot more work, and Tyler Higbee got a lot more work, and he's a really great pickup to get as your tight end this year in the draft, by the way, as well. So we'll look at that in a second here. But I like to just get all of my wide receivers out of the way all in one bunch here. I'm going kind of 2 or 3 running backs to start. Then I like to get 3 or 4 wide receivers. And then the receivers are basically done. You can get wide receivers off the waiver wire anytime. I've never understood this whole 0 RB strategy. It's the worst thing you can do every year, but especially this year. If you're in a full PPR league, maybe you want to look at Michael Thomas in the first round. Maybe you want to rely on pass-catching running backs like James White and Tariq Cohen later, but that's a pretty risky strategy, and especially in half PPR, which we're doing right here. Running back, so important. So in terms of a couple other wide receivers, though, Stephon Diggs going to a new team, a bit of a prima donna. Josh Allen has a big arm, but he's not known for throwing the ball as much as running around with it. Boy, a lot of these are rough. Deebo Samuel I really like, but just today he broke his foot. So he might not even start the beginning of the season. So I think you'll be seeing his ADP fall a lot over the course of the summer here. So you can probably get a really good deal on Deebo Samuel. If it turns out he's only going to miss a couple games, I would really try to get him late because he is the #1 receiver in that offense. Of course, he is behind George Kittle when it comes to catching passes, though. Normally at this point in the draft, the end of the 6th, early 7th, you're going to see a little more wide receiver options here. A lot of these guys, like usually at this point, you've got a Devontae Parker, a Terry McLaurin, a Chark. I like all those guys this year, and they're all off the board surprisingly. So what I'm going to do, because we don't know the severity right now, I'm going to take Deebo Samuel. And because I'm not really in love with this whole range right here, and always look at your ranges here. If there's a guy you really want, but is way down here, you can probably wait a little bit to take him. So I'm going to go to the tight ends. Higbee's a great choice, usually in about the 7th or 8th round in 10-team leagues, but I'm going to go ahead and take Darren Waller here for a tight end selection. Okay, and we'll see what happens when it comes back around to us. But I love Higbee this year. Anger might avoid just he's still rehabbing his foot. His foot still is bothering him, and it feels like we haven't had NFL football in years. Okay, so let's see what's going on. I'm still not looking at quarterbacks, and don't, of course, ever make the mistake of taking kickers or defenses too early. Take them at the very end. No kicker or defense is going to give you much of an edge over any other one. Okay, and I'm only going to take one tight end. I'll take one quarterback at the end, so we can really just focus on running backs and wide receivers here. Okay, Kareem Hunt, love him. That's a premium backup right there. An amazing handcuff for Nick Foles, the best handcuff in the league, or for Nick Chubb rather. And if Chubb gets hurt and Hunt's the starter, I mean, this could win you the league right here. So I'm going to go ahead with Kareem Hunt. And Sony Michel is a bum who doesn't know how to play football. And speaking of feet, he just had foot surgery as well. Darius Geis, way too many injury problems. So here I'm deciding between really any of this range here. Keyshawn Vaughn, though, is supposed to be the new James White, by the way, for Tom Brady. Even though Keyshawn Vaughn in college was not a pure pass catcher, he can do it, but I wouldn't really count on that too much. I'm not sure what to think of Keyshawn Vaughn yet at this point. I'm going to take the safer play and go with James White here. Okay, so you see what we've done here. We've got 3 stud running backs, and then we've got a couple of really good depth running backs here. We've got our 3 top receivers, and again, receivers grow on trees. You can always pick those up off the waiver wire. We've got an elite tight end, and again, we're going to get a great quarterback late, no matter what here. So now, see any receivers I want here? Not really yet. Jamison Crowder is a must-have in full PPR. Half PPR, it's less important. But honestly, I am happy to leave some of my drafts with only 3 wide receivers. If I have 3 elite wide receivers, maybe I'll take a 4th one here because of Debo's status with his foot. But right here, 10th and 11th picks, I have to say Tariq Cohen, if you look at his numbers, he's really only draftable in full PPR unless you get him super late. So what we'll do here, you know what, I think I'll have to go ahead and take Jamison Crowder just as a depth guy there. Darnold loves throwing those short passes to him. And then for a running back, I'm going to go ahead and take a guy I absolutely love this year, Alexander Mattison. When he's out there running, you can't tell the difference between him and Dalvin Cook unless you look at the number on their jersey. They are so similar. Even their haircut's the same. And Madison's fantastic. And not only do you have Dalvin Cook being an injury risk every year, severely, but he's also threatening to hold out right now too. So Alexander Mattison is just a brilliant pickup. If you have Dalvin Cook drafted in the first round, you absolutely have to draft Mattison. Even if it means taking him in the 10th round, don't miss out on Alexander Mattison. But I'm trying to take him even in leagues where I don't have Cook. He's that elite. He's just fantastic. He is an amazing handcuff to have, even if you don't have the actual guy. Okay, when I look at our guys, let's look at the handcuffs we do want here. And this is a great time to start looking at handcuffs, 12th, 13th round especially. And you'll see with FantasyPros, they like to tell you right here who the handcuffs are. So, of course, Miles Sanders, his is Boston Scott, and Kenyon Drake's is Chase Edmonds. Both good players on their own. I'm willing to draft both those guys, especially Boston Scott, even if I don't have the main guys. McCaffrey's backup is Reggie Bonfon, who is not draftable. You don't have to worry about him at all. So let's go ahead and get our handcuffs right here. Boston Scott and Chase Edmonds. And now look at us. We've got that great depth. We've got 3, 5, we've got 8 running backs. And you can just never have too many running backs, especially in non-PPR or half PPR. Okay, so now we're back to the final, now we're down to the final 3 picks here. And so that's going to be our quarterback, our kicker, and our defense. So for quarterback, see, look, like Tom Brady's still there, and he probably won't be in a real draft with humans because people will, go crazy drafting a 43-year-old quarterback. No 43-year-old quarterback has ever had a good season in the NFL. Very few people have actually completed a pass over the age of 40. So I know everyone's on the Tom Brady train more than ever, but I have a lot of issues with that here. Look at all these great quarterbacks here, though. Joe Burrow, I would consider here. Ryan Tannehill, I'd consider. Aaron Rodgers, I'd consider only in 1-year leagues. I wouldn't draft him in Dynasty or anything, but he's probably okay this year. Maybe, if he doesn't quit and hate the team for not giving him anything to work with. But I'm just going to go ahead and smash Tannehill here. And then A lot of people would say go defense and then kicker. I like to go kicker than defense because the kicker is someone you can try and just keep in your lineup every week. And so I'm more concerned about getting a decent guy there that I can just keep. So obviously, if this is how the draft goes, I'm taking Tucker or Butker. But you're going to be playing with guys who draft these guys in the 8th round or something half the time. So you know who I really like this year, and I think he was taken already, was he? No, where is he? Oh, no, there he is, way down there. No, of course he's not taken, if though none of those guys are. I like Zane Gonzalez this year because Arizona is going to have a really good offense, but because Kyler Murray stalls in the red zone, partly because he's short, they're going to have to settle for a lot of field goals, I think. So I absolutely love Zane Gonzalez. I think he's a great pickup as your kicker. And then for the defense, I really like the Indianapolis Colts because all I really do when I look at a defense, I look at who are they playing in week 1, maybe weeks 2 and 3. The Colts have a soft schedule to start. They're playing the worst team in the league week 1 on the road, but it's still the Jacksonville Jaguars who are going to be absolutely atrocious. So I like the Colts this year as my defense. Oh, I got an A. Usually they don't give me a grade that high because of however the software is developed. But anyway, so we got 4 wide receivers here. We got a tight end and a quarterback and a kicker and defense, and the rest is running backs. If you leave your draft with McCaffrey, Drake, and Sanders, you're going to be way ahead of the game. This guy here had 3 running backs. Jonathan Taylor should be good, but won't be the starter to start the year. And a lot of similar young guys there. So, I mean, there's no question that we have the best running back depth and the best running back quality, I think, in this draft here. If you look at anyone, yeah, no one else is really touching you. And that is a huge edge, especially this year. You will find, go on FantasyPros.com, do as many drafts as you want. I've done hundreds and hundreds of simulations in 2020, and you will find that you really need the running backs. And it's just a wasteland after the first couple rounds. So really get your running backs, get them early and take them often and get lots of depth. And trying to get running backs later on in the year, you'll be desperately asking people for trades and it's just a nightmare. You really need to get your running backs. So, all right, so that was drafting from the first position in half PPR in a 10-team league. Hope you enjoyed it. Next time we're going to draft from the number 2 position. Strategy will be similar, but some of the players available might be slightly different. So, yeah, that's all. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.